Hello family, how you doing? This is your brother Vladimir Dees, and this is Mtima Radi, everybody. Mtima Radi, Soul Lightning. Man, peace to you, peace to your home, peace to your family, peace to your community, peace to your ancestry, peace to my community, peace to my ancestry, and peace to the nation that you, I, and they are creating. Peace also to the Godic forces, to the Great Spirit above, the Mother Earth below. To all of my Black Afro-Indigenous beings out there, peace to you. To all of my so-called white but European, what we would call indigenous beings out there, peace also to you. This is more directed towards my Black Afro-Indigenous beings. I'm including a video which I think every Black being should be seeing, because it really speaks to where the world is going and what the coming conflict is going to be about, as the lie that has been perpetuated called white supremacy is being challenged and knocked down. The seeds planted in the 1970s are showing tremendous fruit, and this video is inspired by a comment made in this other video called "We Are Not Just Africans" with Dr. Clyde Winters, and Kemetic adepts, including a brother who I am just in love with now. He is just, some people you're not ready to deal with, and I wasn't ready to deal with him when I came across him 3-4 years ago. But now I appreciate his wisdom, and that's Hiawatha Kaba. The brother is just wow. And then, of course, Dr. Imhotep, who also is on the panel at the discussion. He's a legend in and of himself. So this is a great video, again, that every Black Afro-Indigenous being, and you'll understand when you watch this video, I call us. This is my own independent term, which I will be bringing out further, and you'll see me write about it shortly in the coming year. But I call us Black Afro-Indigenous beings, because we are indigenous to this planet. And yes, Africa is where we came from, whether we want to say that we are Native Americans or not. We are indeed, most of us, Native American. I have Native American blood. I also have African blood in me. And if you understand what Dr. Clyde Winters is saying, you'll see all of the Native Americans came from Africa. So to say Afro-Indigenous is a spiritual term. Now, whether or not we want to add Black to it, we don't have to, but there is a cosmic principle which is added to that. Just like the ironic thing is to the concept of white. There is a cosmic principle to the concept of white. The problem is it has been inverted. In space, white is a minority. Blackness is the majority. And on this planet, the same thing is true. The same thing is true. It doesn't mean one is superior and one is inferior. It just means that's the balance. And it is almost as if the light needs the darkness in order to survive. And once the light fails to keep to its balance, it burns out. It burns out. And I kind of think that's what's happening now. But that's not really what this video is about. This video is more about a challenge that Dr. Clyde Winters made. But you know me, I give all reverence to the Most High and to the ancestors. So if they have me speaking on something else, I'm going to speak on it because they know what they're doing. They know the reason why I'm doing these videos. And ultimately, it's not usually for the reasons which I think I'm doing the videos. Anyway, so it wasn't really a challenge that he made, but it was a statement that he made. He made the statement that as he's getting older, and he is an older man, it's kind of making him sad because there's not many Blacks in America who want to pick up the work that he's doing. And there is really many reasons for this. There is really many reasons why there aren't a lot of Blacks who want to do the work that he's doing. I want to start off with two of them. And I apologize if it seems like I'm fumbling a little bit, but it's a complex issue for me, and yet it's so simple. We as black people, number one, we as black people, we are living in an informational desert. And that informational desert has been created intentionally. It has been created intentionally. The reason why it was created intentionally is because of the fear non-black so-called white people have of what happened in the 60s. In the 60s, we got a little information. A little. And that started in the 50s. The 60s, we think of as happening in a vacuum when it comes to black people, but no. When Brown v. Education happened, it took a few years, but a few black people ended up getting into colleges that they weren't traditionally allowed to get into, and they started researching, and they started seeing things. And so by the 60s, particularly the late 60s, we had a whole new generation of scholars who were able to, and there's actually an elder brother who hipped me to this, and Gerald Horn. I was about to say his name is escaping me, but he hipped me to this, where he admitted, look, black people were never intended to be in the archives in these white schools. So when we got access to them in the 60s, in the 70s, we began to find things out that proved on their face lies that white people had been telling us. Essentially, what occurred, and this isn't his wording, this is all mine. Essentially, what occurred was white people, because they had controlled the information for so long, they could tell us whatever they wanted, and they had our minds captivated with that. So we believed we were nothing, even though, yes, there were books that were published that said we are greater than what they keep telling us. But we didn't read those books, oftentimes because those books were not published in a way that would have reached us. We often say, well, black people just don't read. That's a lie. There was an author, John Taylor Gatto, who found stats from the early 1900s, and I think it was from the military, who had an interest in these things, which suggested and proved from their statistic methods of the day that it was like 90-something% of black people were literate. So, I mean, we've come to expect that black people were stupid and ignorant, when the reality is black people throughout slavery, black people throughout Jim Crow risked their lives to be able to read and to be educated. But we have been told a myth and a lie, because that's what they want us to think. So when we were able to get this information again, and we were able to see just how much they were lying to us, that this society was lying to us, we started shoving that information out, sharing it. And Black Power then moved into the Afrocentric movement, which actually makes sense, because we had been taught from a Eurocentric perspective that we were nothing, that we had no history, that we had no souls, that we were nothing. And so the shift to an Afrocentric construct of the world was not actually to counter European Eurocentric scholarship, even though I know a lot of black academics at the time said, yeah, this is just to counter it. No, this was deeper than countering. This was deeper than countering. This was looking at the world through a lens that wasn't only Afrocentric, but it was human-centric from the standpoint of the first humans coming from Africa. And if you could understand those humans and what they became in Africa, and then what they turned into when they went to Europe, and then what they came out of Europe as, that would change the whole dynamic and paradigm of the world. That's the depth of what Afrocentrism was. And when it was seen that through the 70s and into the 80s, with a culmination of incredible literature, They Came Before Columbus, Destruction of African Civilization, Yorugu, which was one of the latter great works. Just tons and tons of stuff. The work of Wade Nobles, which, wow, Francis Cress Welsing, I think that really scared him. Francis Cress Welsing just like blew their brains out. They became very frightened. Now I remind you that in the middle 1960s, the FBI actually wrote a memo and said, it is our goal to take 1 to 2 generations of black people out of black power, black civil rights movements. It is our goal to do that. Now, they didn't go on to further explain how this was their goal or how this was going to be accomplished, but I can bet you, and I've said many times to people talking about this, that they had a plan. They sent this around to every intelligence agency that the United States have, and I often, I forget this point, but I want to bring it up to you right now. The FBI is a department inside the Department of Justice. We forget about that. The FBI is an department inside the Department of Justice. It is a bureau inside the department. It is not actually a standalone department. And yet it had the power to suggest that intelligence agencies, including defense intelligence agencies, utilize their resources and their strength to go after black people, to take them out of being in the mindset. Because that's what this is talking about. This is talking about hijacking your mind, taking your mind over. They had the power to be able to say, we need to change the mind of black people so they are not engaged in black power and black civil rights and all those and all the type of activities that knowingly surround black power and black civil rights. And so what began to happen, and we don't tend to make these connections, what began to happen is you had a corporate coup d'etat, a takeover of the universities. You had foundations being funded to the millions or billions of dollars. You had things like the Heritage Foundation propping up. You had a conservative effort to not only restrict what they called the left wing in this country, which, by the way, the true left wing, not this progressive nonsense that's out there now, the true left wing included what they call black radicals, and in black radicals they included people such as Jesse Jackson, which, is like a downgrade from Martin Luther King, but also black power advocates. And later on, there was intense scrutiny of people who had black bookstores and Afrocentric bookstores that catered specifically to black people. They worried obsessively about this concept of black power becoming infused in another generation. Heck, they worried about it becoming infused for 2 generations. They didn't, again, talk about how they would stop this from happening. But, as I said before, it just so happens that within 5 years of that memo, there was an intense movement. Actually, it might have been a little bit more than 5 years. I think that memo might have been 64. It might have come out right before Malcolm X died or right after, one of the two. But in the early 70s, you had the Powell Memo, which stated how corporations could take over the college campuses so that radicalism could never take root again. And we are now on the back end of that memo where you see corporate control everywhere. Everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. So within, I'll just say 10 years of them making that pronouncement, they had this means of doing that. And Bob Law, in an interview that, again, is just fantastic from the context of white supremacy, Bob Law talked about the corporate takeover of black music and black entertainment. That's another one all black people should view and watch, because it is it's powerful in what it suggests. But we then seen an effort, and there was a couple of these efforts, to literally purge, get rid of black people who were not conservative enough, were not corporatist enough, were not steeped in this idea of anti-black poweredness. We saw this happen. This happened in the early 80s. It happened again in the late 80s. It happened again in the early 90s. And it happened again in the late 90s. The remnants of those folks you saw throughout the early 2000s. Obama really rooted out a lot of them, because Obama was a corporatist who was put in office, and then when people dared to criticize Obama, they were then ostracized and often lost their positions. We need to understand what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, family. We need to understand what's going on. So, what I have found is a lot of the material which was given freely by people, black people, to other black people, to other colonized people, to other oppressed people. And this is important, that we need to understand this. Black people were not, just as Dr. King said, we were not selfish enough to care only about our own interests. We have always had a global view and a global mindset. And people say it's detrimental. But we have to have a global view and a global mindset, because we are the parents of this planet. Everything we do impacts everybody. White people know it. This is why they spend so much time and so much energy studying us and influencing our community and our culture. But back to the point, that which we gave openly and freely to our people, which we gave to all oppressed people, all colonized people, we gave it freely, lectures, books, papers, all of that. From the 1960s through the 1980s, all of that stuff is kept in archives in white universities, which use it to make money. It is not freely available to us. It is not freely available to the people who actually need it. And that needs to stop. We wonder, Dr. Winters wonders why there's not a newer generation just itching to take up his mantle. I'll tell you why. Because there has been an effort to stop that from happening. If I had known the things that I have found out in the past 10 years, but more specifically, the past 5 years, if I knew that when I was 15, 16, 14, 13, my mind would be differently structured. My mind would be differently structured. The goals that I have sought to achieve over the past 30 plus years of my life would have been completely different. Completely. Most of the elders do not understand what has actually occurred to this generation. And I'm just now understanding just how devious the people up at the top of this society actually are. The work that they have done to constrain the minds of this generation, to capture and destroy the hearts of this generation, to manipulate us in manners which is so destructive. that to really truthfully see what they have done, we have to be able to step back from ourselves and view ourselves from another level. We have to be able to detach from ourselves to view ourselves not only as we are today, but as we were at some distant past. And then be able to reflect into the future. And this is a difficult task because we are not taught to do this. You can learn it through meditation, and you should learn it through meditation. You can learn it through teaching yourself to focus, to use your third eye. Most of us don't use our third eye. You can learn about it when you start delving into the aura, A-U-R-A. When you start delving into the chakras and the relationship of the chakras to the body. You can learn it if you go into those things, but most of us, we don't know about those things. Because when we hear those things, we think, oh, well, that's a white thing. Oh, no. We created that stuff. That is for us too. Dr. Winters does not get what hip-hop was weaponized to become against us. I was listening to a message that Mama Assata Shakur created about hip hop. And it's funny, in 2016, I could find, and I blame myself for this because I should have started, grabbing them as soon as I saw them. But I could find probably a dozen, maybe more, Assata Shakur audio pieces. And I wanted to look them up to share with a friend. Look, this is who she really is. This isn't, I was trying to show them why she was exiled into Cuba and why they keep beating her down years later. I wanted to show them, so I went to look for these clips. Gone. Absolutely gone. I spent the better part of 2 days looking for them. Couldn't find them. They were gone. Now, maybe they've reappeared. This was a while ago. This was last year. But at the time, couldn't find them. But she was talking about hip-hop and its importance. And the reality is, white people knew hip-hop was important. It took them a while to get there, but they knew it. And they said, we need to take it over and we need to redirect it. And a friend of mine shared with me a video of a Jewish man. And, I get the whole thing. Oh, well, you're an anti-Semite. If you say anything negative about Jews, then, oh, you must be an anti-Semite. Oh, please, no. Yeah, whatever. He straight up said, look, we bought it, and yeah, we pumped this crap out. What? Do you have a problem? That's what we did. We made money doing it too. You act like there's a problem with it. He didn't care that it cost lives. He didn't care that it destroyed black culture. He didn't care that it was a malfunctioning disformity of black culture. He didn't care that it was a malfunctioning disformity of black culture. He didn't care. It was all about money. All about money. And I'm going to tell you, I've listened to people, such as Dave Emery, like his work. But the one thing that Dave Emery is off about is the relationship of Jews and to the rest of the world. The one thing he is complete. There is a minority of them that I think are incredible people. But there's too many of them. And I really do think it's the majority of them because of where they came from. They ain't Hebrews. They are Jews. That's a difference. And they came from straight out of the European lineage. They are not good people. They will never be good people. And it's time to admit that. Doesn't mean all of them. But when you can see a pattern over and over and over again with a certain group of them, you can't convince me that they are anything different than who they are. Just because they slapped the name Jew on them doesn't change the fact that they're Caucasian. It doesn't change the fact that they came out of that ice. That's a reality. Mr. Emery may not like it because Hitler, but that's a reality. Don't show me a Klansman and then tell me, well, he's still a good... No, he's a Klansman. That's what he is. I am not mad about it, but that's what he is. And because I know the relationship of the Klan to people who look like me, you damn right, I am going to be watchful. I know the relationship of many Jews to black people and how they view black people. And let me tell you, that means I got to be watchful. It doesn't mean that I see a Jew, I hate the Jew. No. It means that I know that there's this strain there that could be detrimental to me. Black people, we need to be approaching stuff like that. We need to be approaching stuff like that. Again, though, I want to get back to the point because it is an important point. So much of what we did in the 60s has been locked up away from us, and that has been deliberate. You have thousands of hours of footage. Thousands, probably tens of thousands of hours of audio. You have hundreds of thousands of pages of books and papers and what have you, locked away in archives away from black people. Our inheritances. That's what these things are. They are our inheritances, are locked up in archives where we can't get them. We can't get them. You have schools like Harvard and Princeton and the one that's on Stanford and Berkeley. You have schools like this with libraries, deep libraries of black wisdom, of radical thought in concepts that were meant to be given to the generation of black people who are living now and the one that just came before us. And they are locked up where they cannot be accessed. They are locked up. And I know because I've tried accessing some of these papers. I've tried accessing some of these things. When you have unpublished manuscripts, which are considered some of the best work, when you hear people reference it, and you have unpublished manuscripts from people who they say, look, you read this manuscript, man, it's like mind blowing where he's coming from for this reason and that reason. And yet it's been sitting there for 30 years, or it's been sitting there for 40 years, or it's been sitting there for 28 years or 25 years. And it begins you to wonder why. And then I started realizing, because I've written to some of these places, look, I want access to this stuff. Can I get a copy of it? No reply. Sorry, we don't give out copies of that, but you're more than welcome to come in and, pay money and access it. What? Or, well, yes, we can give you a copy of that, but it's going to be $150. Or, in the case of a couple of papers that I found intriguing and interesting, they wanted something like $50 per paper, and I wanted 10 papers. That's $200. Now, of course, the person who is a corporatist, whose mind has been really steeped with this consumerist nonsense, will say, well, wait a minute. They have to make money. They have to make money, and, you pay for everything else. Why don't you just pay for that? Well, let's be very frank about this. One, most of these schools are not hurting for money. Two, most of the work that they are charging me for was written by people who intended for the work to be given to the next generation. And 3, most of the people who wrote the work did not die rich. And probably their families won't see 1 ounce of that money that I'd have to pay to have access to that stuff. This is the same thing happened with music. Most of the older black artists died in poverty, even though their music was making millions of dollars a year. Because the corporations, which most colleges are, well, they're not technically corporations because they don't have to pay taxes, as I understand. But the corporations would take the money and then not give them residuals. So I understand where you're coming from. But you have to understand the political side of this. They do this to make sure that we can't have access to our inheritance. So to Dr. Clyde Winters, that's why there's nobody waiting in the wing, or there's very few. Plus, we have to always remember, you don't call something crack because it looks like it came out of a mountain. I've said this to many people before. The way I view crack is it was a means of splitting the spiritual, the community spirit, the community soul of black people. And we need to understand that. All right. Questions, comments, concerns, leave them below. I look forward to hearing from y'all. I look forward to talking with y'all. Peace and love to all of y'all.